What would you think if I informed you that you can relish your favorite pasta without worrying about your blood sugar levels? Eat whatever you want, not just pasta, without worrying about your blood sugar going up. Wouldn't it be wonderful? This is one of those videos where I will continuously walk on a thin wire stretched between scientific information and nonsense, in a very delicate balance between popularization and the need to keep you firmly grounded. No magic tricks, not possible to eat whatever you want without caring about blood sugar levels. Wait. Unless we talk about everything you can do to reduce the impact that carbohydrate-rich foods, such as bread, pasta, focaccia, and potatoes, have on your blood sugar and insulin. But stay with me until the end, because the last three are the real key tips, the ones that potentially enable a significant portion of the population to not think at all about blood sugar, not even when they consume a steak tiramisu from grandma. Some studies suggest that apple cider vinegar may reduce the glycemic response of a carbohydrate-rich meal, for example by incorporating a tablespoon of it in a salad consumed as an appetizer. The hypotheses on the table that explain this effect are different. For example, a possible mechanism of inhibition of the enzymatic activity of some digestive enzymes is supposed, but the fact remains that the effect seems measurable, although obviously it does not replace the more consolidated management practices which we will see in the end. In other words, the use of apple cider vinegar can be considered as like a gem, a complementary gem to more robust approaches rather than a standalone remedy. The increase in blood sugar is directly related to the speed of carbohydrate absorption. The more quickly they pass into the bloodstream, the larger the metabolic exertion for your body to manage them. However, pairing carbs with other nutrients can slow this process, with positive effects on blood sugar levels. Protein fats delay stomach emptying, while fibers have a sort of sequestering effect on carbohydrates, but the mechanisms underlying this effect are not important. What is important is that it works effectively. This translates into the advice to accompany your favorite pasta dish or any other source of carbohydrates with other nutrients, or with a nice portion of vegetables. You never go wrong. For example, a nice mixed salad or a zucchini sauce, but also a grilled chicken breast or maybe some nuts are useful in this sense. For technical ones, remember, it's the glycemic load of the meal that determines the effect on your blood sugar, not the glycemic index of the food. We'll talk about it later. If accompanying carbohydrates with other food can be helpful, it is even more effective to do so in a specific order, that is, leaving carbohydrates for last. In the ideal order, at least glycemic-wise, we've already discussed it in more detail before. And I will not make it as lengthy, but essentially, we have compelling evidence that the consumption of macronutrients other than carbohydrates, specifically proteins and fats, can greatly decrease post-meal blood sugar levels. Impeding gastric emptying, enhancing glucose-stimulated insulin release, and reducing hepatic insulin clearance, i.e., the rate at which it is degraded, are the effects of retarding gastric emptying. In summary, ensure main carb source in meal is last course and, with equal food portions, glycemic response will be more advantageous. Moreover, it's why nutritionists advise having sweet treats on a full stomach if you must consume them. Be careful not to confuse blood sugar and calories, because this strategy does not change the calorie impact of food in any way. It simply modulates its metabolic management. The same factors, even if with potentially different underlying mechanisms, apply to fiber. Oh yes, I'm obviously thinking about vegetables. This is also one of the positive side effects of adopting a revised meal order, let's say, to the usual habits. Personally, I eat vegetables first, followed by the protein part of the meal, then carbohydrates, and finally fruit. Beginning with veggies, I promptly satisfy my appetite and then move to carbs like whole grains, pasta, bread, sweet potatoes, or other options that are the most gratifying to me in terms of taste, without the ravenous hunger I could have had at the start of the meal. The last aspect, but always very personal, is that starting from vegetables also pushes me to mentally build the menu with vegetables at the center, which you know should represent at least half of your meal quantitatively. The blood sugar of your next meal will be influenced by the meal you had before. This is the explanation of the second meal effect. The reason why it happens is not yet clear, although attention is focused on the intestinal bacterial flora and the substances it produces, including short-chain fatty acids. For example, if it's breakfast, you eat foods rich in fiber, such as whole grains, rye bread, fruit with peel. This can help stabilize blood sugar levels for the rest of the day. One important caution to note is that the authors of this study emphasize that grinding and prolonged cooking can negate the beneficial effect on the subsequent meal. Therefore, it is recommended to consume whole grains and legumes in their original form or as minimally processed products in order to maximize the potential benefits in the hours that follow. About overprocessing. Not all pastas are equal when it comes to impact on blood sugar. Whole wheat pasta, e.g., has a glycemic index that is slightly lower compared to refined pasta because whole grains are by definition rich in fiber, which slows glucose absorption into the bloodstream. Opting for whole wheat pasta is still a great idea, regardless because, in my opinion, even more importantly, they are nutritionally much denser and richer in minerals and vitamins compared to refined counterparts. In summary, the less processed a food is, the better. By the way, regarding impact on blood sugar, the rule states that whole grain cereal is gentler than pasta, which is gentler than bread. Because the refining process and the physical structure of foods have a significant impact on their glycemic response. Whole grain cereals like oats, rye, and wheat in grain form have a physical structure that takes longer to be broken down by digestive enzymes and then digested in the body's gastrointestinal system. However, cooking also has a significant influence on metabolic response. Pasta, especially when cooked al dente, still maintains a sufficiently compact structure that the body needs to break down using more time and resources, unlike overcooked pasta, which is much more easily and quickly digestible. For the same reason, cold pasta sees the starch content transform into resistant starch. This type of starch, as the name suggests, resists digestion in the upper part of the intestine and is then fermented in the colon, behaving more like a fiber. This process of transformation, called starch retrogradation, happens when the pasta is cooled down after being cooked. Same with potatoes and also with the process of aging of bread that gradually becomes stale. Resistant starch has a lower impact on blood glucose levels compared to normal starch, thus contributing to a lower, more gradual glycemic response. Exercise caution. Do not assume these are major differences. They should be viewed more as, I don't say curiosity because it's about measurable answers, but let's say metabolic nuances. Anything but shades, they are instead, as promised, the last 3 strategies that are now arriving. Engaging in physical activity is one of the most effective strategies you can implement to control and reduce post-meal blood sugar spikes. Any form of physical activity helps. High-intensity exercise would be perfect, but it's not that simple. Sure, a high-intensity exercise would be perfect, but even a short walk or a lighter physical activity can help reduce postprandial blood sugar. Second good news, physical activity, to be effective on blood sugar, can be done both before and after meals. If done in advance, even much earlier, it will help reduce the glycogen stores in your muscles, which will then be more eager to take sugar from the blood as soon as it becomes available. Talk to a sporty friend. He'll say you have an ideal 2HR window after the activity, but don't worry. This is a strategy that is particularly helpful for athletes. Just remember that the key is to move, the timing is secondary. So secondary that even the walk after lunch, even just to take Oliver to pee, is still useful. You may have heard of the glycemic index of foods, which is actually a parameter designed to predict how your body responds in terms of blood sugar to the consumption of a certain food. Brown rice, for example, has a lower glycemic index compared to that of refined rice. That's why it is considered metabolically less aggressive. However, it was soon realized that the glycemic index T by itself is a somewhat flawed value. Because, for example, a cooked carrot can reach even very high values. But how? A carrot? But is the problem the carrot or the parameter? The problem is the parameter, which as it is conceived does not take into account a truly fundamental aspect, the portion, so important as to be incorporated into a much more useful value for practical purposes, the so-called glycemic load. I don't want to bore you with the math formulas of glycemic index and load, but just remember that 100 g of pasta will have a much bigger impact on your blood sugar than 50 grig. And the same obviously goes for bread, rice, potatoes, focaccia, any food with carbs. Oh, but don't fall into the mistake of thinking that it is necessary to consume reduced portions in absolute terms, because the portion always needs to be contextualized based on your daily calorie needs. And here we arrive at the most critical and vital strategy of the current day. A healthy person, in good shape, with a good diet and reasonably active lifestyle does not need the majority of the strategies that are commonly observed. Just because his body is perfectly equipped to handle the increase in blood sugar, which is caused by a typical serving of pasta. Yes, even when he eats at relatives' homes and thus finds refined pasta, maybe overcooked as grandma forgot it on the stove. And there is no reason to decline even on the second serving of tiramisu, because occasional indulgence is balanced by a careful daily routine and a perfectly fit metabolism. Which then, if you consider it, the majority of the strategies we observed previously automatically become a component of a healthy lifestyle. Rotation of foods and cooking methods, combinations with healthy proteins and fats, plenty of fruits and vegetables, preference for whole sources, physical activity, and believe me, it doesn't matter what your current situation is, because there is definitely room for improvement. Let's consider the worst case scenario that you are diabetic. In the past, we have already said how in some patients it is actually possible to observe a complete regression of the condition. But even in the worst cases, I guarantee you can aspire to a huge improvement, and the path is always the same. If weight loss is necessary, focus on a healthy and varied diet, along with regular physical activity. By continuing on this path, the ultimate goal is to improve your insulin sensitivity and optimize overall metabolism through conscious and sustainable choices, rather than resorting to quick or drastic tricks and solutions. It is crucial, extremely crucial, to refrain from being fixated on blood sugar, because the more you embrace a healthy lifestyle, the higher your body's capacity to metabolically manage your food choices, even with intermittent indulgences. A diabetic patient or someone with reduced glucose tolerance will have less freedom, but if you find yourself in this situation, there is still a lot of room for improvement, even for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for your attention and your trust. However, remember that a stranger on the internet cannot and should never replace your primary care physician or your diabetologist, because only they can know and take into account your specific needs. Thank you. Thank you again. Hello?